Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Real Clear Politics Takeaway for Tuesday, July 6th. I'm Tom Bevan, co-founder and president of RCP.
And I'm Carl Cannon, Washington Bureau Chief. Morning, Tom.
Good morning, Carl. It is George W. Bush's birthday, Carl.
Yes, he was one of the original baby boomers, along with Bill and Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump. 1946 was a busy year for the greatest generation.
It also happens to be my mom's birthday. So happy birthday out there to my mom.
Happy birthday, Mrs. Bevan.
And one other notable person, Carl.
Nancy Reagan was born on this date in Manhattan 100 years ago today, Tom.
Wow. So, Carl, let's talk about the 4th of July weekend. Everybody was, for the most part, it seemed like out and back to normal in a lot of places around the country. But we also, Carl, now looking back on the weekend, are surveying the carnage from across the country. I think 180 people were killed, 540 shot, including about over 100 here in Chicago. 19 people died here in Chicago over the weekend, including 13 kids. This crime wave, Carl, is a real thing. It's a real problem, and it's happening all over the country.
You know, Tom, in Chicago, your mayor said that 99% of her critics were, racist or sexist. And I think we probably need to get beyond that. And I think I'd like to see the two parties talk to each other and see what can be done. President Biden's default position in his, first few months in office has been gun control. And that has to be part of the conversation. But something else is going on. And you can't help but think that part of it is this budget cuts to police departments in many of these big cities, the excoriation of police, the low morale of police. There seems to be a law enforcement component too, and it strikes me that this would be the time for President Biden to make good on his promise. And he talked about when he was running that he implied he would get Democrats and Republicans to work together, and he said he'd work just as hard for the people who didn't vote for him as those who did. Well, this is a time where it seems both sides in the political divide need to give some ground and figure out how to address this.
Carl, I'm not sure whether that'll happen or not. For Trump, obviously, his tone when he talked about cities and crime, he called them hellholes. He called them, he used to obviously talk badly about Chicago in particular, but he did have his idea, and it's one that's been tossed around but never really used, was to bring in the National Guard, right? Why don't we have people, the National Guard deployed on street corners around the city to secure the city for all of the people who are afraid to let their kids, walk the streets, go play, ride their bikes? I mean, these kids are getting shot. I know people will say, well, we don't want to militarize. The optics of that are not great. But the flip side to that, Carl, is that people are afraid to go outside. They are dying. They're getting shot. It's amazing to me that we just tolerate this level of violence day in, day out, week in, week out in a place like my hometown of Chicago.
Well, I agree with you, and we shouldn't tolerate it. I have to tell you, though, that the National Guard, to me, that's not just bad optics. That's bad policy. We need to we don't want to have martial law in this country. We don't want to militarize every problem. We need to figure out how to get a handle on it. There's 100 things we could do before it comes to that. For many years.
Carl, don't you have to actually stop the violence? I mean, we could talk about solutions that are, medium term, long term, that will help rebuild communities. But I mean, that's in the future. The crisis is now. How do you stop it now from happening?
Well, Tom, there's no easy answer, but I just don't think that is the answer. This is a civilian problem. We need to, that's not really what the National Guard is for. We need to figure out how to restore order on our streets. Look, Tom, there are things that have been done in law enforcement. In New York City for, a generation, they did stop and frisk, and what they did was stop suspicious looking people, and young men usually, and they surprising number of times frisked them and found guns, and they did handguns, and they did that policy did two things. One is it got some bad actors off the street, and second, it sent the word out that if you were armed, you're liable to be arrested, and so fewer people went armed. Now, That policy was abandoned. Bill de Blasio ran for mayor on a promise to get rid of it. It was challenged in court. Too many of those people were stopped because they were people of color. The NYPD was, sometimes abusive in how they handled it. They took too much power, too much authority, and they bred ill will for the police department within the minority community. So that thing, but there's something there, getting guns out of the hands of these young teenage gunmen, gang members is a start. We know how to do it, and they have to figure out how to do it without being racist and without causing racial animosity in the community. I mean, that's just one policy. Chicago could do this. And so I don't think there's a lot we need to do. I just don't think National Guard would really get to the problem.
I keep waiting, Carl, for, the Howard Beale moment where someone's going to stand up and yell, we're not going to take this anymore. We're people, damn it, but it never happens.
Well,
it's
one other thing.
Unbelievable to me that there is no one of stature who has taken the lead on this and forced it into the national consciousness.
Well,
I mean, it's not just Chicago, it's other cities as well. And we wake up every Monday morning and read the, gruesome stat sheet on how many people have been shot, how many people have been killed. And there doesn't seem to be any concern or urgency on the issue. And that just disturbs me every single time I read these stories.
Well, and Tom, in some ways, the problem is it's even worse than we think. In Chicago, a couple weeks ago, I noticed there, 10 people had died, but 52 were shot. We have these great hospitals where they can treat gunshot wounds, and things that used to be fatal aren't anymore. I mean, it's an epidemic of gun violence in these big cities, and it needs to be dealt with. And the other thing is, if you're running an organization and it's called Black Lives Matter, and that's your slogan and that's your ideology, and the Democrats, many of them have embraced it. I think we need to start thinking, all Black Lives Matter, not just those killed by police, but those killed by, black men are more likely to be victims of this crime, this street violence than anyone else, and we need to think of it in those terms, I believe.
All right, we will leave it there for this morning. I'm Tom Bevan, co-founder and president of RealClearPolitics.
And I'm Carl Cannon, Washington Bureau Chief, and this has been the Real Clear Politics Takeaway for Tuesday, July 6th, 2021, 6 months to the day after the U.S. Capitol was stormed by rioters.